The hum of the city was a distant lullaby, a sound I'd grown so accustomed to that it barely registered most nights. But tonight, it was amplified by the profound stillness in my apartment, a stillness broken only by my own soft breathing and the even softer rhythm of the man beside me. I was somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, drifting in that warm, hazy space where dreams still clung to the edges of consciousness when a sensation feathered across my upper lip. It was so light, so utterly gentle, that I wasn't entirely sure it was real. Then came the voice, a low rumble that resonated more through my chest than my ears. "You have such beautiful lips." My eyes fluttered open. The room was shrouded in the muted glow of pre-dawn, just enough light to sketch the contours of Santiago's face beside me. He was propped up on one elbow, his dark hair falling artfully across his forehead, eyes, dark as midnight pools, fixed on mine. There was a softness in his gaze, an unguarded tenderness that felt like a revelation in the quiet, intimate space of my bed. For a moment, I just stared, utterly captivated. My heart, which had been beating a sleepy, steady rhythm, gave a surprised little jump. It wasn't just the words, though they were unexpected and disarmingly sweet. It was the way he said them, a breathy, almost reverent whisper, as if he'd been holding that thought inside for a long time, and it had finally, irresistibly, escaped. "Santiago?" I managed, my voice raspy with sleep. A slow smile spread across his face, and he reached out, his thumb tracing the curve of my jawline. His touch was warm, a comforting anchor in the dimness. "Sorry," he murmured, though his eyes twinkled, betraying no actual remorse. "Didn't mean to wake you. You just looked peaceful." I felt a blush creep up my neck, a sensation that surprised me. I was 34, not some teenager, but Santiago had a way of cutting through all my carefully constructed defenses, making me feel exposed and seen in a way few ever had. "Peaceful, huh?" I tried to make it sound casual, but my voice still had that morning thickness, or just drooling. He chuckled, a rich, warm sound that filled the silence. "Definitely peaceful. And no drooling," I checked. His gaze dropped back to my mouth, and the air around us seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken current. "Seriously, though, Alex, they are." My breath hitched slightly. There was no artifice in his voice, no flirtatious game. It was pure, simple admiration, and it hit me with a surprising force. My lips, I'd always considered them just lips. Functional, a little thin, maybe, nothing special. But the way he looked at them, the way he spoke, it was as if he saw something in them that I never had, something beautiful. I reached up, my fingers brushing against his arm. "You're being ridiculous." But the smile that played on my own lips betrayed my feigned protest. He leaned in closer, his scent, a mix of something woody and his own unique warmth, enveloping me. "No, I'm being honest." His eyes searched mine, serious now. "Sometimes I just look at you, and I can't believe how lucky I am." And just like that, the usual morning anxieties that often pricked at the edges of my consciousness dissolved. My mind, usually a bustling architectural firm of deadlines and designs, quieted into a serene atrium. With Santiago, I often felt like the best version of myself, a version I hadn't known existed. He brought out a softness in me, a vulnerability that was both terrifying and utterly liberating. "Lucky, huh?" I echoed, my voice softer now. "I think that makes two of us." He dipped his head then, pressing a light, lingering kiss to my claimed to be beautiful lips. It was tender, slow, tasting of sleep and possibility. When he pulled back, his eyes still held mine. "Good morning, Alex." "Good morning, Santiago." We lay there for a while longer, just existing in that shared space, the silence between us not empty but full, brimming with unspoken affection. The first tendrils of daylight began to paint the sky outside my window in hues of soft gray and pale rose. It was a perfect, quiet start to a Saturday. Eventually, the urgent pangs of hunger disrupted our reverie. Coffee? I asked, finally pushing myself up. Santiago stretched, his muscles flexing under the thin sheet, a sight that never failed to make my breath catch. Definitely. And maybe those amazing blueberry pancakes you make? I laughed, a genuine, easy sound. Demanding, are we? Just appreciative, he countered, sliding out of bed, his movements fluid and graceful. He grabbed a pair of sweatpants from the chair where he'd tossed them last night, pulling them on. You cook, I'll handle the coffee. Deal? Deal. As I got out of bed, I snuck a glance in the mirror, looking at my reflection with new eyes. My lips. They still looked like my lips, but Santiago's whisper had imbued them with a certain glow, a secret beauty only he seemed capable of seeing. It was a strange, wonderful feeling. We'd been together for about 3 months now, Santiago and I. 3 months that felt both like a blink and a lifetime. We met at an art gallery opening, one of those pretentious but occasionally inspiring events I felt obliged to attend for networking purposes as an architect, even though my heart really belonged to the quiet solitude of design. He was there, not as an artist, but as a graphic designer, admiring a piece with an intensity that drew me in. I'd seen him from across the crowded room, his dark eyes focused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. My practical, structured world felt suddenly illuminated by his presence. I'd never been particularly bold, especially when it came to romance. My last serious relationship had ended rather abruptly 2 years prior, leaving a lingering bitterness and a deep-seated reluctance to open myself up again. I'd built walls around my heart, expertly crafted emotional barriers like the facades of the buildings I designed, sturdy, functional, and largely impenetrable. But Santiago, with his easy smile and genuine warmth, had somehow found the blueprint to my hidden doorways. He'd approached me first, actually. "That's quite a piece, isn't it?" he'd said, gesturing to the abstract sculpture I was pretending to understand. "Looks like a deconstructed dream catcher." I'd chuckled, surprised by his perceptiveness. I was thinking more like a very expensive tumbleweed. He'd laughed then, a sound that instantly disarmed me. "I like your interpretation better. Alex, right? I'm Santiago." He held out a hand and his grip was firm, reassuring. That simple introduction had led to an hour of conversation amidst the clinking glasses and hushed chatter of the gallery. We talked about art, about our work, his world of vibrant digital design, a stark contrast to my structured blueprints, yet strangely complementary. We found common ground in our shared passion for creativity, albeit expressed in different mediums. He was curious about my architectural projects, and I was fascinated by his ability to capture emotion and narrative in a single image. By the end of the night, I had his number in my phone, a flutter in my stomach I hadn't felt in years, and a distinct feeling that something important had just happened. Our first date was coffee, which stretched into lunch, then a walk through a park, then dinner. It was effortless, exhilarating. He made me laugh, genuinely, from the gut. He listened with an intensity that made me feel like every word I spoke was precious. He saw things, not just in art, but in people, in moments, that I often overlooked in my methodical approach to life. And now, 3 months later, here we were, sharing quiet Saturday mornings, his breath on my lips, his whispers in the dark. It was a level of intimacy I hadn't anticipated finding again, and it both thrilled and terrified me. I made my way to the kitchen, the scent of fresh coffee already filling the air thanks to Santiago. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through something on his phone, a contented hum escaping his lips. He looked up as I entered, flashing me another one of his brilliant smiles. "Morning, sleepyhead. Coffee's brewing. Just waiting for those legendary pancakes." "They're not legendary," I corrected, pulling out the mixing bowl and ingredients. "Just good. Good enough to be legendary in my book," he insisted, walking over to press a kiss to my temple. "What can I do to help?" "You already did your part," I said, measuring flour, "unless you want to be my official taste tester for batter consistency." He grinned. "My specialty." He pulled up a stool at the kitchen island, watching me work. "So, got any big plans for the weekend, Mr. Architect?" I cracked an egg into the bowl, stirring it with milk. Client meeting on Monday, so I need to finalize some sketches for the Henderson project. Nothing too exciting. I glanced at him. What about you, Mr. Graphic Designer? Couple of freelance things I need to send out, but mostly, he paused, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I was hoping for some quality Alex time. My heart did that little flutter again. It was these simple, unadorned statements of affection that always got me. No grand declarations, just quiet, sincere expressions of desire for my company, for my... Sounds good to me, Mas, I said, trying to keep my voice even, though I could feel a warmth spreading through my chest. We fell into a comfortable rhythm. I mixed the batter, he poured the coffee. He shared a funny meme he'd found, and I told him about a frustrating design challenge I was facing. It was easy, natural, like we'd been doing this forever. That's what always amazed me about Santiago. With him, there was no need for pretense, no awkward silences to fill. We just flowed. As the first pancake sizzled on the griddle, a small memory surfaced. It was from a few weeks ago, during one of our earlier sleepovers. I'd woken up in the middle of the night, startled by a nightmare, and found him already awake, watching me with that same tender gaze. He'd simply pulled me closer, wrapped his arms around me, and held me until the fear subsided, whispering reassurances into my hair. He hadn't asked about the dream, hadn't pressured me to explain, just offered comfort. That night, I realized he wasn't just attracted to me. He cared. Deeply. And that was a terrifying, exhilarating realization for a man who had grown adept at keeping his heart under lock and key. Penny for your thoughts? Santiago's voice broke into my reverie. He was holding out a steaming mug of coffee. I took it, the warmth seeping into my hands. Just thinking about how good this coffee smells, and how much I like having you around. He leaned over and kissed the top of my head. Ditto, Alex. More than ditto. Times a million. We ate our pancakes at the small table in my dining nook, sunlight now streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The world outside was slowly waking up, but our little bubble felt insulated, peaceful. So, the Henderson project, Santiago began, wiping a dab of syrup from his chin. Tell me about it. What's the challenge? I appreciated his interest, not just in my life, but in the specifics of my work. Most people glazed over when I started talking about structural integrity or material choices, but Santiago always listened, sometimes even asking insightful questions that made me rethink my own assumptions. They want an extension to their existing house, a kind of sunroom, but it has to blend seamlessly with the original 1920s architecture, I explained, gesturing with my fork. And it needs to be flooded with natural light, obviously, without compromising privacy from the neighbors. Oh, and it has to be eco-friendly. It's a lot of constraints for a relatively small space. Santiago nodded, chewing thoughtfully. So old-world charm meets modern practicality and a dash of green living. Sounds like a puzzle. Exactly, I said, a small thrill going through me that he understood so quickly. And I've got a few ideas, but nothing feels quite right yet. I'm playing with some glass panel designs, different types of sustainable wood, but I'm struggling to find that aha moment, you know? That one element that pulls it all together. He put down his fork, meeting my gaze. What if you thought about it less like an addition and more like a transition? I frowned, intrigued. A transition? Yeah, like, how do you visually connect the old to the new? Not just physically? What's the story of the space? Maybe the connection isn't just about matching materials, but about echoing themes. What's unique about the 1920s house? Its craftsmanship? Its original purpose? I leaned back, genuinely considering his words. He had a knack for reframing things, for looking at problems from a slightly different angle. It was one of the things I admired most about his creative mind. The original house has these beautiful, handcrafted, leaded glass windows, I mused, picturing the Hendersons' home. Very intricate, very period-specific. There you go, Santiago's eyes lit up. What if the sunroom, instead of being a stark modern glass box, integrated elements of that craftsmanship? Not literally leaded glass, maybe, but a modern interpretation of the pattern, or even just the feeling of light filtered through something intricate. You could use frosted glass panels with a subtle etched pattern that evokes the old windows, letting in light but maintaining privacy. My mind began to whir. Frosted glass, etched patterns, a modern echo of historical craftsmanship. It was brilliant. It wasn't what I'd been thinking at all, but it made perfect sense. It connected the old and new in a way that felt both respectful and innovative. Santiago, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face, you're a genius. He just shrugged, looking pleased. Just thinking outside the box. You architects are sometimes too focused on the structural integrity of the box itself. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Well, this box just got a lot more interesting. Thank you. Any time, he said, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. That's what partners are for, right? Different perspectives. Partners. The word hung in the air, a soft, warm chime. It wasn't just about dating anymore, was it? It was about something deeper, something interwoven. It was about sharing ideas, supporting each other, building something together, whether it was a sunroom design or a life. After breakfast, we decided to take advantage of the beautiful morning and go for a walk in Central Park. It was one of our favorite things to do, to wander through the winding paths, the vibrant energy of the city fading into the background, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. As we walked, our hands naturally found each other, our fingers intertwining. The ease with which we navigated the world together was still something I found astonishing. I, Alex, the man who often felt a tremor of social anxiety in crowded spaces, felt utterly at peace, utterly myself, walking hand in hand with Santiago. We talked about everything and nothing, about the absurdities of modern art, about childhood memories, about our hopes for the future. Santiago spoke about his dream of one day opening his own small studio, a space where he could focus on more personal artistic projects, not just client work. It's a big leap, though, he admitted, kicking at a loose pebble. The financial uncertainty, the grind of building a client base from scratch, it's daunting. But you're brilliant, Santiago, I said, squeezing his hand. You have a unique vision. I've seen your personal work. It's incredible. You'd succeed. He gave me a shy smile, something that always made my heart melt. For all his outward confidence, he had a genuine humility about his talent. Maybe, one day, it's still just a sketch in my head. Well, you know I'm good at turning sketches into reality, I teased, nudging him. You've got a built-in architect for your studio space when the time comes. His smile widened, and he pulled me closer for a quick, playful kiss on the cheek. I'll hold you to that, Alex. As we rounded a bend, we came across a group of street performers playing lively jazz music. Santiago, ever the free spirit, immediately started swaying to the rhythm, his eyes closed, a pure joy radiating from him. I watched him, mesmerized. He wasn't afraid to feel, to express, to lose himself in the moment. It was a stark contrast to my own often reserved nature. But instead of feeling self-conscious or out of place, I found myself loosening up, a smile spreading across my face as I watched him. He opened his eyes then, catching my gaze, and without a word, reached out a hand. I took it, and he gently pulled me into a slow, easy sway, mimicking the rhythm of the music. We weren't dancing, not really, just moving together, lost in our own little world amidst the hustle and bustle of the park. It felt incredibly intimate, a silent conversation between our bodies that spoke volumes about our connection. Later, as we walked back towards my apartment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows behind us, a more serious conversation emerged. It started, as it often did with us, subtly. You know, Santiago said, his voice a little quieter than before. Sometimes I feel like I'm still figuring out who I am, like there are so many versions of Santiago floating around, and I haven't quite decided which one to fully commit to. I looked at him, surprised by the sudden vulnerability. He always seemed so sure of himself, so grounded. I think that's normal, isn't it? I asked gently. Life's a constant evolution. We're always changing, always discovering new parts of ourselves. He sighed, pushing his hands into his pockets. Yeah, but sometimes it feels like I'm not sure where I fit. Professionally, personally, I have big dreams, but sometimes I feel like I'm holding myself back. Or maybe I'm just afraid. Afraid of what? I prompted, stopping at a crosswalk, turning to face him fully. He met my gaze, a flicker of something raw in his eyes. Afraid of failing, I guess. Or maybe afraid of finally getting what I want and realizing it's not enough, or that I'm not enough for it. His confession resonated deeply within me. It was a fear I knew intimately, one that often kept me up at night, despite my outwardly successful career. The fear of not being enough. It was the underlying current that had made me so cautious about love, about opening up after my last breakup. I'd convinced myself that if I didn't risk everything, I couldn't lose everything. I get that, I admitted, my voice low. More than you know. After my last relationship, it ended pretty badly. Left me feeling like a complete failure, like I was unlovable, in a way. So I just stopped trying, stopped letting people in completely, built those walls I told you about. Santiago reached out, his hand finding mine again, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. And then I came along and started chipping away at them, huh? He said, a small, sad smile on his face. I looked at him, a sudden surge of emotion welling up inside me. Yeah, I whispered. You did. And it is terrifying, because the higher the walls, the more they hurt when they come down. I'm sorry if I've pushed too hard, he said, his eyes filled with concern. I never want to make you uncomfortable, Alex. I see so much good in you, so much love, and I want to be worthy of it. Don't apologize, I said, squeezing his hand tighter. You haven't pushed. You've just shown me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to feel. You've made me remember what it feels like to trust again, Santiago. And that's a gift. The traffic light changed, and we started walking again, the weight of our shared confessions hanging in the air. Not heavy, but significant. It felt good to voice those fears, to acknowledge them with someone who understood, someone who was willing to share his own. So about those walls, Santiago said, a playful note returning to his voice, though his eyes remained serious. Are they still standing? I thought about it for a moment, about the quiet mornings, the shared laughter, the way he looked at my lips in the dark, the way he supported my ideas, the way he showed up, truly showed up, for me. Parts of them, maybe, I confessed, a soft smile spreading across my face, but you've definitely found some cracks. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to rebuild them anymore. He squeezed my hand. Good, he whispered, because I'm not going anywhere. That evening, after a simple dinner we'd cooked together, pasta and wine, our usual Saturday night fare, we settled onto the couch, music playing softly in the background. The day had been full of moments, big and small, that had woven themselves into the fabric of our burgeoning relationship. The whisper in the dark, the pancake breakfast, the architectural brainstorming session, the walk in the park, the shared vulnerabilities, each one a thread, intertwining us more tightly. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beside me, his arm wrapped around me, his fingers absently stroking my arm. The comfort was immense, a balm to the sometimes restless nature of my mind. You know, I said, my voice muffled against his shirt, that sunroom idea you gave me, I think it's exactly what I needed. It sparked something. He chuckled softly. Glad I could be of service. Maybe I should start charging consulting fees. You're already getting paid in pancakes and good company, I countered, looking up at him. He looked down, his eyes meeting mine. There was that tenderness again, that deep, unwavering affection that made my chest ache in the best possible way. He didn't say anything, just leaned in, his gaze dropping to my lips. This time, I didn't wait for him to initiate. I met him halfway, pressing my mouth against his. It was a slow, deliberate kiss full of everything we hadn't said, everything we had. It was a kiss of gratitude, of promise, of burgeoning love. It wasn't a wild, passionate kiss, but a profound one, grounding us in the present moment. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "Still beautiful," he murmured, his voice husky, his eyes still closed. I smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached my eyes, only because you see them that way. He opened his eyes, and a quiet intensity radiated from them. "No, Alex, they just are, and so are you." And in that moment, in the soft glow of my living room, with Santiago's arms around me and his words echoing in my heart, I finally, truly believed him. The walls weren't completely down yet, but the gates were wide open, and Santiago had walked right in. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was excited. The morning light, filtering tentatively through the blinds, was the first thing to register. It was soft, hesitant, much like the feeling that had settled in my chest. I opened my eyes slowly, not wanting to disturb the quiet, not wanting to break the spell. Santiago was still asleep beside me, his breathing even and gentle, his arm a warm, reassuring weight across my waist. That whisper from the night before still echoed in my memory. "You have such beautiful lips." It wasn't just the words, but the way they'd been delivered. A breathy caress against my ear, a delicate revelation in the dark. It had made my skin tingle, a warmth spreading through me that hadn't quite dissipated even now, hours later. My lips, I realized, were still faintly buzzing with the ghost of his touch, a phantom sensation that made them feel more alive, more significant than they ever had before. I shifted slightly, just enough to turn my head and look at him properly. In the muted morning light, his face was relaxed, utterly peaceful. His dark hair was a little disheveled, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, softer. I noticed the faint dusting of stubble along his jawline, the slight curve of his nose, the way his eyelashes fanned out against his cheekbones. It was a face I'd only truly seen animated, alight with conversation or laughter, or intense with focus. Seeing him like this, unguarded and serene, felt like a privilege, a wave of something profound, a mix of tenderness and awe washed over me. It was more than just physical attraction, though there was certainly plenty of that. It was the feeling of connection, a sudden, almost overwhelming sense that something important had shifted within me. I wasn't usually one for grand declarations or dramatic epiphanies, but lying there, watching Santiago breathe, I knew this wasn't just another casual encounter. This felt different. It felt like the precursor to something significant. My mind started to race, sifting through the events of the previous day, the way we'd met, the easy flow of our conversation, the surprising comfort we'd found in each other's company. It had been quick, yes, but not rushed. It felt organic, like two rivers finally finding a confluence. We'd talked for hours, sharing stories about our lives, our work, our dreams, the silly little quirks that make us who we are. Santiago had this infectious laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He remembered details, asked follow-up questions, genuinely engaged. And then, somehow, we were here. He stirred then, a soft groan escaping his lips as he stretched slightly. His arm tightened around me reflexively. My heart gave a little thump against my ribs. I held my breath, pretending to still be asleep, even though I knew he'd probably feel the tension in my body. His eyes fluttered open, dark and a little bleary with sleep, before settling on my face. A slow smile spread across his lips, and my breath caught. That smile. It was disarming, warm, and entirely genuine. "Morning," he whispered, his voice still thick with sleep, a low rumble that vibrated pleasantly through my chest, where his arm rested. "Morning," I replied, my voice a little husky. I felt a blush creeping up my neck, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. It was both mortifying and thrilling. He shifted again, rolling onto his back, pulling me closer so my head rested against his shoulder. His fingers began to toy with a strand of my hair, a light, teasing touch. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in ages," I admitted, the honesty surprising even myself. And it was true. There was a sense of peace that had enveloped me in his presence, a quiet comfort I hadn't realized I was missing until I felt it. He chuckled softly. "Me too. I usually wake up feeling like I've wrestled a bear." He squeezed my side gently. "Guess I just needed a good cuddle buddy." The casualness of the statement could have sent my thoughts spiraling into overthinking mode, but his tone, the way his fingers continued to play with my hair, felt more intimate than dismissive. It felt like a gentle invitation to relax. "I can be a good cuddle buddy," I murmured, leaning into his warmth. We lay there for a few more minutes, just breathing, just being. The silence wasn't awkward. It was companionable, filled with the unspoken nuances of the night before and the nascent possibilities of the day ahead. Eventually, though, the practicalities of morning started to assert themselves. The distant sound of traffic, the rumble of a neighbor's coffee machine. "Coffee?" Santiago asked, as if reading my mind. "Please," I said, pushing myself up slightly. He got up first, his movements fluid and unhurried. I watched him pull on a pair of soft gray sweatpants that had been draped over a chair, admiring the lean line of his back, the subtle flex of muscles as he moved. There was an ease to him, a natural grace that was captivating. He turned and caught my gaze, and I felt myself flush again. He just smiled, a knowing, playful glint in his eyes. "Don't worry," he said. "I make a mean cup of coffee. You'll be glad you stayed." I laughed, a genuine, bubbling sound. "I think I'm already glad." We shuffled into the kitchen, the soft morning light now brighter, revealing the comfortable lived-in feel of my apartment. It was a little messy, perhaps. A few books stacked on the counter, a plant looking a touch droopy. But it felt like me. Santiago didn't seem to notice or care. He navigated the space with a relaxed confidence, finding the coffee maker, the mugs, the sugar. It was a simple act, but watching him move through my personal space, making himself at home, felt incredibly intimate. "So," he started, as the rich aroma of brewing coffee began to fill the air, "tell me about this place. You live alone?" "Yeah, just me," I replied, leaning against the counter, watching him. "It's a one-bedroom, nothing fancy, but it's home. Been here for about 5 years." "Nice. It has good vibes," he commented, then turned to me, handing me a steaming mug. "Black, right?" I remembered. A small thrill went through me. It was such a small detail, yet it spoke volumes. He'd paid attention. "You did," I said, taking a sip. "Perfect." We sat at my small kitchen table, the mugs warming our hands. The conversation flowed easily, moving from inconsequential morning thoughts to deeper reflections about our careers, our aspirations. Santiago worked as an architect, which I remembered him mentioning the night before. Today, he elaborated a bit, talking about his passion for sustainable design, his frustration with bureaucracy, the satisfaction of seeing a concept come to life. He spoke with such enthusiasm, his eyes sparkling, his hands gesturing expressively. "It's more than just drawing lines on a blueprint, you know?" he said, taking a thoughtful sip of his coffee. "It's about creating spaces where people thrive, where they feel connected to their environment. It's about building something that lasts, something beautiful and functional." I found myself utterly captivated. "That's amazing, Santiago. I never really thought about it that way. I just thought..." "Buildings." He chuckled. "Exactly. Most people do. But think about your favorite spaces, whether it's a park, a cafe, even your own apartment. There's a deliberate thought process behind why they feel good, why they work. I guess I never considered the intention behind it all, I mused. My work is so different. It's about words, about meaning, about communicating ideas that are often abstract. I'm a content writer, mostly for tech companies, which sounds dry, but I try to find the poetry in it. But it's still about creation, isn't it? He challenged gently, leaning forward. You're building bridges between complex ideas and people who need to understand them. You're shaping narratives. That's incredibly powerful. His insight was sharp, and it made me feel seen. He wasn't just nodding along, he was truly listening, truly understanding the essence of what I did, even the parts I sometimes struggled to articulate. We talked for what felt like hours, coffee turning cold in our mugs, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Eventually, the easy rhythm of conversation drifted into a comfortable lull. I found myself just watching him, appreciating the way the sunlight caught the subtle gold flecks in his dark eyes, the way his fingers drummed a soft rhythm on the tabletop. There was an undeniable pull, a magnetic force, that drew me to him. "So," he said, breaking the silence, his gaze warm and direct, "what's the plan for today? Any grand adventures, or are we just going to sit here and solve the world's problems one philosophical musing at a time?" I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I hadn't really made any plans, just figured I'd catch up on some reading, maybe do laundry. The thrilling life of a content writer on a Sunday. He laughed, a rich, full sound. "Laundry can wait. Reading is important, but a little fresh air never hurt anyone. How about we explore? I've heard there's a really cool street art scene down by the old warehouses. Or maybe a farmer's market? I love a good farmer's market." The offer was tempting. A part of me, the part that craved routine and predictability, wanted to demur. But a stronger, newer part, one that felt invigorated and alive after Santiago's whisper, pushed back. "A farmer's market sounds perfect," I said, a lightness in my voice I hadn't realized was missing. "I actually need to pick up some fresh produce anyway." "Excellent," he said, pushing his chair back. "Then let's make it an adventure. Give me 5 minutes and I'll be ready." He went back into the bedroom to retrieve his clothes, and I took the opportunity to quickly tidy up the kitchen, my mind buzzing with an excited energy. A farmer's market. With Santiago. It felt so normal, so easy, yet so utterly new. When he emerged, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, he looked effortlessly handsome. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready for anything," he declared, a twinkle in his eye. "Just a farmer's market, Santiago, not a trek up Everest," I teased, grabbing my keys and wallet. "You never know what treasures you might find," he replied, opening the door for me with a flourish. The day was crisp and bright, the kind of autumn day that makes you feel glad to be alive. We walked to the market, the city slowly waking up around us. We talked about everything and nothing. The interesting architecture of a building we passed, a funny anecdote from our childhoods, our favorite kind of pizza. His hand brushed mine once, then again, before finally, and quite naturally, his fingers intertwined with mine. My heart did that little fluttery thing again, but this time I didn't try to hide it. I simply squeezed his hand in return. The warmth of his touch was grounding, comforting. The farmer's market was a sensory explosion. The vibrant colors of fresh produce, the earthy scent of ripe vegetables mingled with the sweet aroma of baking bread and roasted coffee. There was a gentle hum of conversation, the joyful cries of children, the occasional strumming of a street musician's guitar. We meandered through the stalls, Santiago pointing out exotic fruits I'd never seen, debating the merits of different types of artisanal cheese. "You know," he said, picking up a bright red bell pepper and inspecting it closely, "I love coming here because it feels real. It's tangible. So much of our lives are digital now, virtual. But here, it's about the soil, the sun, the people who grow things with their hands." "I know what you mean," I agreed, admiring a display of freshly cut flowers. It's a reminder of where things come from, and everything just tastes better when it's fresh. We ended up buying an assortment of things: plump tomatoes, a crusty loaf of sourdough, some fragrant herbs, and a small, vibrant bouquet of sunflowers. Santiago insisted on carrying the heaviest bag, his strong hand occasionally brushing my arm as we walked. There was an unspoken ease between us, a comfortable rhythm that made it feel like we'd been doing this for years. We stopped at a small cafe near the market for a late lunch, sharing a table by the window. The sunlight streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Over sandwiches and iced tea, our conversation shifted again, delving a little deeper. We talked about our families. Santiago told me about his parents, who lived in a small town outside the city, his two older sisters, and how growing up in a bustling, close-knit household had shaped him. "We were always loud," he chuckled. "Always arguing, always laughing. My mom's cooking was legendary. You should meet them sometime. They'd love you." The casual invitation, "they'd love you," hung in the air, light as a feather but weighty in its implications. It was another small tremor, a hint of something more substantial than just a day out. I felt a nervous excitement bloom in my chest. My family was a bit more reserved. My parents were wonderful, but our interactions were often quieter, more structured. I hadn't brought anyone home in a long time. The idea of introducing Santiago to them, or meeting his, felt like a leap into a future I hadn't even dared to consider a day ago. "I'd like that," I said, my voice softer than intended. I felt a little vulnerable, a little exposed, but Santiago just smiled, his eyes warm, understanding. He didn't push. I told him about my parents, my younger brother, who lived halfway across the country, our quiet Christmases. It felt strange, laying out these intimate details of my life to someone I'd only known for such a short time, yet it also felt incredibly natural, like I was finally filling in gaps he already implicitly understood. As the afternoon wore on, a faint anxiety started to prickle at the edges of my contentment. This was all so wonderful, so easy. Too easy? My mind, ever the skeptic, began to churn. Was I reading too much into this? Was I building castles in the air based on a whisper and a shared morning? Past experiences, bruised and battered, whispered doubts into my ear. I'd been here before, felt this rush of connection, only to have it dissolve like morning mist. What if Santiago saw this as nothing more than a pleasant diversion? What if I was projecting my hopes onto his kindness, his genuine interest? I caught myself pulling back slightly, my answers becoming a little more guarded, my gaze drifting away from his. He noticed, of course. He was too observant not to. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked gently, his hand reaching across the table to cover mine. His touch was warm and reassuring. I hesitated, then decided honesty was the only way forward. "Just thinking," I began, looking at our intertwined hands. "It's been such a nice day. You're really easy to be with, and it feels good. Maybe too good, if that makes sense." I looked up at him, my vulnerability laid bare. "I just don't want to get ahead of myself, or misunderstand things." He squeezed my hand. His expression was serious, kind. "I understand that feeling," he said softly. "It's a scary thing, feeling something real, especially when it's unexpected. But I want you to know everything I've said, everything I've felt today, it's real for me, too." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not playing games, and I'm not looking for something fleeting. I genuinely enjoy being with you, Santiago." He used my name, which felt significant, an anchor in the swirling sea of my anxieties. The way he said it, with a gentle emphasis, made it sound like an affirmation. My name. The relief that washed over me was palpable. It was like a knot I hadn't realized was tightening in my stomach, suddenly loosened. "Good," I breathed, a small smile finally breaking through. "Good. Because I'm not either. And I really, really enjoy being with you, too." We lingered a little longer at the cafe, just talking. The air cleared. My anxieties had receded. replaced by a renewed sense of hope and a deeper, more confident connection. When we finally decided to head back, the afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and soft pink. Instead of going straight back to my apartment, Santiago suggested we take a detour through a small park we'd passed earlier. It was quieter there, away from the bustling streets, with ancient trees casting long shadows. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the fading light, the rustling leaves underfoot. "You know," he said, breaking the quiet, his voice thoughtful, "when I whispered that to you last night, about your lips, it wasn't just about how they looked." I turned my head to look at him, my curiosity piqued. "Oh?" He stopped, turning to face me fully. The soft twilight bathed his features, making him seem both familiar and incredibly handsome. It was about what they conveyed, the stories they told when you smiled, the way they curved when you laughed, the sincerity in your voice. It was about all of that, bundled into this one beautiful feature. He reached out, his thumb gently tracing the line of my lower lip. The touch was feather light, sending shivers through me. It was about the person behind them, the person I was starting to get to know and already really liked. My breath hitched. His words were so utterly sincere, so deeply felt. It was more than I could have imagined, more than I had dared to hope for. It wasn't just a compliment. It was an affirmation of a deeper appreciation, a recognition of my inner self. This wasn't just about physical attraction. It was about seeing me, truly seeing me. "Santiago," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. The sunset glow painted the world around us in warm, gentle tones, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in it. He leaned in then, slowly, giving me all the time in the world to pull away if I wanted to, but I didn't. I met him halfway, my eyes fluttering closed as his lips finally met mine. This kiss was different from the quick, passionate ones of the previous night. This was slow, ender-laden with all the unspoken emotions of the day, all the nascent promises that had formed between us. It was a kiss that spoke of understanding, of shared vulnerability, of a quiet acceptance. It was a kiss that solidified something, a new beginning. When we finally broke apart, it was only by a fraction of an inch, our foreheads still resting against each other. His eyes were dark and intense, mirroring the depth of feeling in mine. "Thank you," I murmured, not quite sure what I was thanking him for the kiss, for the words, for the beautiful day, for simply being him. He smiled, a soft, contented curve of his lips. "Any time," he whispered back, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. We walked the rest of the way back to my apartment, our hands clasped tightly, a comfortable silence settling between us once more. But now it was a silence filled with a newfound understanding, a quiet certainty. The air was cooler now, the first stars beginning to pepper the darkening sky. Back in my apartment, we put away the market treasures, the fresh scent of herbs filling the kitchen. There was a domesticity to it, a sense of shared space and purpose that felt incredibly natural. We ended up ordering takeout for dinner, sitting on the couch, legs tangled, watching a documentary we both found fascinating. It wasn't dramatic or grand. It was just life, shared, made infinitely better by his presence. As the night deepened, the comfortable intimacy returned. We lay in bed, not immediately falling asleep, but talking in hushed tones, the day replaying in our minds. There was no need for grand gestures or declarations. The day had been filled with 1,000 small moments, each building on the last, solidifying the connection we'd started to forge. He pulled me closer, his head resting against mine, his arms still a warm anchor around me. "Today was perfect," he whispered, his voice soft with sleepiness. "It was," I agreed, my heart swelling with a quiet contentment. I traced lazy patterns on his arm. "Thank you for that." "Thank you," he corrected, his voice tinged with genuine affection. "For letting me in, for just being you. I closed my eyes, a sense of profound peace settling over me. The initial thrill, the nervous anticipation, had mellowed into something deeper, more substantial. It wasn't just about beautiful lips anymore. It was about the beautiful person I was discovering, and the beautiful connection we were building, brick by emotional brick. The whisper in the dark had been the opening note, but this day, this new kind of dawn, felt like the beginning of a much richer, more complex melody. As I drifted off to sleep, curled against Santiago's warmth, I knew one thing for certain. I wanted to hear the rest of the song. The rhythm of our lives together had become a beautiful, understated symphony. It wasn't a loud, dramatic piece, but something more like a classical chamber work, intricate, harmonious, full of subtle swells and quiet cadences that spoke volumes. Waking up next to Santiago had transformed from a thrilling novelty into a comforting bedrock. The mornings were my favorite. I'd often stir first, the faint glow of dawn painting the bedroom in soft hues, and just watch him sleep. His face, relaxed and unguarded, held a vulnerability I rarely saw when he was awake, a hint of the boy he once was peeking through the lines of the man he'd become. His dark hair would be mussed, a lock often falling across his forehead, and his breathing was always deep and even. One particular Tuesday morning, the air still cool despite the encroaching spring, I remember tracing the curve of his jaw with my fingertip, a silent gesture of affection. He stirred then, a soft groan escaping him, and his eyes fluttered open. They were still heavy with sleep, but the moment they found mine, a smile blossomed, slow and utterly disarming. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. He reached for me, pulling me closer until my head rested on his chest, the steady thump of his heart a grounding presence. "Morning, sleepyhead," I whispered back, burying my face in the warm skin of his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of him. A mix of soap, his natural musk, and something indefinably Santiago. "You always wake up so ready," he chuckled, his arm tightening around me. "Like you've already had a full day's worth of thoughts?" I laughed softly. "Maybe I have. Just been enjoying the view." He squeezed me again. "Cheesy. Only for you." That morning, as with many others, we just lay there, tangled together, letting the world outside fade for a little while. These were the moments that cemented everything, the quiet interludes where the profound depth of our connection really sank in. We'd moved past the initial rush, the breathless excitement, into something deeper, more sustainable. It wasn't less passionate, just a different kind of fire, one that burned steadily, warming every corner of my existence. Our lives had begun to intertwine in myriad ways. His toothbrush now sat beside mine in the bathroom caddy, a mundane detail that felt momentous. His spare keys jingled on my keyring. We had our spots at local cafes, our movie nights, and our routine of cooking dinner together most evenings, usually to a soundtrack of something soulful and R&B, or sometimes, much to my chagrin, his eclectic mix of obscure 80s synth pop. Even those moments where I'd roll my eyes good-naturedly at his musical choices were infused with a comfort I hadn't known before him. But with this comfort came a new kind of vulnerability. As we settled into the easy rhythm, the unspoken parts of ourselves started to surface. It's like when you move into a beautifully decorated house. Eventually, you start opening the closets, looking under the floorboards, discovering what's truly there. And what was truly there, for both of us, included histories, past hurts, and quiet fears. One Saturday afternoon, we were curled on the sofa, a documentary about ancient civilizations droning softly in the background. My head was in his lap, his fingers idly stroking my hair, a habit he'd picked up that I secretly adored. He'd been unusually quiet all day, his gaze often distant, lost in thought. I'd noticed, but hadn't pressed, knowing he'd share when he was ready. "My dad called this morning," he said suddenly, his voice low, breaking the comfortable silence. My eyes flickered open, meeting his. "Oh, everything all right?" He sighed, a heavy sound. "Yeah, fine, just family stuff." He paused, his gaze drifting to the window, watching the leaves dance outside. He asked if I was seeing anyone. A beat of silence. My heart gave a tiny lurch. We hadn't really talked about family, not in depth. I knew Santiago had a somewhat strained relationship with his father and that his mother had passed away several years ago. His father, as I understood it, was a traditional man, and Santiago had mentioned, in passing, that his coming out hadn't been met with immediate celebration. "What did you say?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice neutral, not wanting to put any pressure on him. He looked back at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. I said yes. I told him I was happy. Another sigh. He just changed the subject, asked about work. His usual deflect. I reached up, my hand covering his on my hair, squeezing gently. "That's tough, Santi." He nodded, running his thumb over my knuckles. "Yeah, it's always been like that. Ever since I was a teenager, really. My mom was always my biggest supporter, you know? She was the one who hugged me when I cried after a rough day at school, the one who told me it was okay to be myself, no matter what. After she passed, it felt like I lost my anchor. My dad, he's not bad, not really. Just, he doesn't know how to deal with feelings, especially mine. Especially this." His voice trailed off, laden with a complex mix of sadness and resignation. I shifted, sitting up, turning to face him fully. I took both his hands in mine. "It sounds incredibly lonely, having to navigate that without her." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the deep well of that loneliness in his eyes, suddenly stark and raw. It was. For a long time, it was just me trying to figure out how to build a life that felt authentic without the person who taught me how to be authentic. My heart ached for him. It was a weight I hadn't fully grasped before. I knew snippets of his past, but hearing it laid bare like this, the quiet pain of a father's emotional distance and the profound loss of a mother's unconditional love, it felt like seeing a new, vital piece of his soul. "And now?" I asked gently, my thumb stroking the back of his hand. He swallowed, a small knot in his throat. Now it's different. I have you." His gaze was unwavering, earnest, and that makes a huge difference. Just being able to talk about it, to have someone who understands, it means everything. My own eyes welled up a little. It was such a simple statement, yet so incredibly powerful. It wasn't just about having someone to share his life with, but someone to witness his pain, to hold space for his history, to make him feel less alone in the parts of himself that still carried wounds. I leaned in, kissing his forehead, then his eyelids, then finally his lips, a slow ender press that spoke volumes without needing words. It was a kiss of promise, of understanding, of unwavering presence. "I'm here, Santiago," I murmured against his mouth, "for all of it." He pulled me into a fierce hug, holding me tight, burying his face in my shoulder. I could feel the tremor in his body, the quiet release of years of bottled-up emotion. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown, but a profound letting go, a sharing of burdens. In that embrace, the space between us seemed to shrink, dissolved by shared vulnerability. Later that week, fueled by this deeper understanding, we found ourselves talking about the future in a way we hadn't quite before. It wasn't just abstract dreaming, but concrete discussions. We were sitting at our usual corner booth in the cafe near my apartment, sipping on lukewarm coffee, the clatter of plates and muffled conversations forming a comfortable backdrop. "You know," Santiago began, stirring his coffee with a spoon, "I've been thinking about that old cabin upstate." I looked up, intrigued. He'd mentioned a small family cabin that had been passed down through his mother's side, a place he hadn't visited in years, not since his mother was alive. "The one your mom loved?" I asked. He nodded, a soft smile touching his lips, a wistful look in his eyes. "Yeah, It's pretty rustic, nothing fancy, but it's got this incredible view of the lake. I haven't had the heart to go back alone. Too many memories, I guess. He paused, swirling his spoon in his mug. But I was thinking maybe we could go, fix it up a bit, make some new memories. The idea bloomed in my mind, vibrant and inviting. It wasn't just a weekend trip, it was an invitation into a sacred, previously closed off part of his past, a place imbued with the love of his mother. It was an offer to help him reclaim something beautiful that grief had locked away. Santiago, I said, my voice softer than I intended. That's a really big deal. Are you sure? He met my gaze, his eyes earnest. I am. I think it's time, and I want to do it with you. He leaned across the table, his hand finding mine, his fingers intertwining with mine, a silent affirmation. It feels like the right next step, you know? Building something together, literally, fixing up a place that holds so much history, and putting our own stamp on it. My chest swelled with emotion. This wasn't just about a cabin. It was about building a shared future, about a merging of lives and histories. It was an act of profound trust and love. I'd love that, Santi, more than you know. And so the cabin became our project, a tangible manifestation of our evolving relationship. We spent weeks poring over Pinterest boards, dreaming up designs, researching DIY projects. Our weekends became a flurry of trips to hardware stores, dusty aisles filled with possibilities, debates over paint swatches, and the shared excitement of choosing new fixtures. It wasn't always glamorous. There were arguments over styles, frustrations with stubborn bolts, and moments where we were covered in sawdust and sweat. But through it all, there was a palpable sense of purpose, of creation. We'd drive up to the cabin every other weekend, a 3-hour journey that felt like a pilgrimage. The first time we unlocked the creaking front door, a wave of nostalgia washed over Santiago, evident in the slight tremor of his hand as he pushed it open. The air inside was musty, thick with the scent of pine and thyme. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grime-covered windows. It was rustic, just as he'd described, but I could see the bones of something beautiful, a place that held warmth and history. As we worked, clearing out old furniture, sanding floors, painting walls, he'd tell me stories. Stories about his mother, about summers spent fishing in the lake, about childhood adventures in the surrounding woods. I listened, absorbing every detail, piecing together a fuller picture of the man I loved. He spoke of his mother's laugh, her gentle hands, her unwavering belief in him. It was clear that she was a foundational figure in his life, and in a way, through him, I felt like I was getting to know her too. These stories were precious gifts, allowing me to understand the roots of his kindness, his quiet strength, and even his occasional moments of melancholy. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of stripping old wallpaper, we were sitting on the porch swing, sipping beer, watching the sun dip below the tree line, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. The lake below shimmered, reflecting the last vestiges of light. I leaned my head on his shoulder, utterly content despite the aches in my muscles. "She would have loved you," he said softly, his voice a little thick with emotion. I looked up at him, my heart clenching. "Your mom?" He nodded, a faraway look in his eyes. "Yeah. She had a way of seeing people, really seeing them. She would have seen your heart, and she would have been so happy I found someone like you." The words were a balm to my soul, a profound blessing from someone I'd never met. It felt like an acceptance, a confirmation that I belonged in his world, not just his present, but his past and his future too. It was a feeling of being truly integrated, truly known. But with this deep immersion, with the blending of our lives and futures, came moments of introspection, even a touch of fear. It's a strange thing, falling so completely in love. It fills you up, makes you feel utterly alive, but it also creates a new vulnerability. What if I messed this up? What if I wasn't enough? What if, somehow, I lost this incredible connection? These anxieties weren't persistent, but they were like quiet undertows, occasionally pulling at the edges of my contentment. One night, back in our apartment, after a particularly intimate conversation about our hopes and dreams, I found myself lying awake long after Santiago had fallen asleep. The city outside was a muted hum, a stark contrast to the quiet of the cabin. I turned on my side, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. His hand lay curled near his head, and I gently reached out, intertwining my fingers with his. He stirred, not fully waking, but a soft sigh escaped him. His lips, the same beautiful lips that had sparked this whole journey, were slightly parted in sleep. I remembered his whisper that night, so long ago now, yet still so vivid. "You have such beautiful lips." It had been a gateway, a first step into a world I hadn't even known existed, a world of profound connection and heart-aching tenderness. Now, as I looked at him, truly seeing the man beside me, my heart felt too big for my chest. It wasn't just physical attraction anymore, though that was still very much alive. It was the way his eyes crinkled when he genuinely laughed, the quiet way he listened when I was troubled, the unwavering support he offered, his patience when I was being difficult, his passion for things he cared about, his gentle strength. It was the whole Santiago, layered and complex, beautiful in every facet. A quiet fear pricked at me then, a fear that was born of the very depth of my love. What if I wasn't enough to hold on to this? What if I inadvertently pushed him away? My past relationships had all, in one way or another, ended in disappointment. Not necessarily dramatic implosions, but a slow fizzling, a recognition that the connection wasn't as deep or as lasting as I'd hoped. With Santiago, it was different. It felt like bedrock, like something designed to endure, and that, paradoxically, made me feel incredibly exposed. I pulled my hand away gently, careful not to wake him, and just lay there, gazing at the ceiling, wrestling with my own internal landscape. It wasn't doubt in him, but doubt in myself, a familiar companion from earlier, less confident years. The next morning, however, as Santiago made us coffee, humming a tune from one of his beloved 80s synth-pop bands, the anxieties of the night receded, replaced by the sheer joy of his presence. He caught me watching him, and his smile was radiant. "What's on your mind?" he asked, pouring me a mug. I hesitated, then decided to be honest, albeit gently. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, and how sometimes when something this good comes along, it almost feels too fragile to be real." He set the mugs down, then came around the counter, taking my hands in his. His gaze was soft, understanding. "It's not fragile, it's real, and it's strong because we're building it together." He squeezed my hands. "I get it, though. When you've been through things, it's hard to trust something this good. But you can trust this. You can trust us." His words were like a grounding force, pulling me back from the edge of my own anxieties. He had a way of doing that, of seeing past my unspoken fears and offering exactly the reassurance I needed, without me even having to articulate it fully. It wasn't just physical attraction, or shared interests, or comfortable routines. It was this profound, almost telepathic understanding, this deep empathy that made our bond truly extraordinary. The cabin project continued to progress, becoming more than just a renovation. It was a metaphor for our relationship. We were stripping away old layers, patching up weaknesses, infusing it with new life and our shared vision. We spent a particularly memorable weekend painting the living room a serene shade of sage green, laughing as we accidentally got paint in each other's hair, then ending the day with an impromptu slow dance to an old record Santiago found tucked away in a dusty box. The music crackled, the air still thick with paint fumes, but in his arms, swaying gently, I felt a sense of belonging so profound it brought tears to my eyes. "This is it, isn't it?" I whispered, my voice a little choked. He held me tighter, his chin resting on my head. "This is it. Our beginning." His words weren't just a simple statement. They were a quiet vow, a promise hanging in the air, tangible and true. The cabin, once a place of old memories and lingering grief, was slowly transforming into a sanctuary, a testament to resilience, and a home built on new love. It was rough around the edges still, far from finished, but it was ours. And in its incompleteness, there was a beautiful authenticity, a sense that we were actively creating our world, day by day, brushstroke by brushstroke, whisper by whisper. The surface of our lives was smooth and beautiful, but beneath it, the foundations were being laid, deep and strong. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The first sliver of dawn was just beginning to paint the edges of the heavy bedroom curtains when I stirred. Santiago's arm was draped possessively over my waist, his breath soft and even against my neck. It was a familiar comfort, a silent anchor in the often turbulent sea of life, and one I had come to rely on more than I ever thought possible. I shifted slightly, nestling deeper into the curve of his body, the faint scent of his skin, a mixture of sandalwood and something uniquely him, filling my senses. For a long time, I simply lay there, listening to the quiet rhythm of our breathing, letting my mind wander back through the years that had led us to this bed, this moment. It felt like a lifetime ago, the night he'd first whispered those words, "You have such beautiful lips." I remembered the shock, the blush that had crept up my neck, the intoxicating thrill of being seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't been before. That whisper hadn't just been a compliment, it had been an invitation, a promise, a revelation that there was a boundless capacity for tenderness and passion within him. Within us? We'd weathered a lot since then. The initial heady rush of new love, the sometimes awkward introductions to friends and family, the inevitable disagreements that felt like the end of the world until they morphed into deeper understanding. We'd navigated career changes, family illnesses, and even a brief period of long distance when my work took me to another state for a few months. Each challenge, each triumph, had woven another thread into the tapestry of our shared life, making it stronger, richer. But now we stood at another precipice, a different kind of challenge, albeit one born from opportunity. The offer from the museum in Santa Fe had been unexpected, a true once-in-a-lifetime chance for Santiago to curate his own wing, to bring to life the artistic visions he'd always dreamed of. It was a monumental step for his career, one he'd worked tirelessly for, and my heart swelled with pride every time I thought about it. The problem, of course, was that Santa Fe was a world away from the city we'd built our life in, the city I'd always called home. I carefully disentangled myself from his embrace, trying not to wake him, and slipped out of bed. The floorboards creaked softly underfoot as I made my way to the kitchen, the cool tile a welcome contrast to the warmth of the bed. I started the coffee maker, the gurgle and hiss a familiar morning symphony. Leaning against the counter, mug warming my hands, I stared out the window at the cityscape slowly coming alive. The decision had been hanging over us for weeks, a silent, weighty presence in our otherwise joyful routines. Santiago, ever considerate, had framed it as our decision, never pressuring me, always emphasizing that my happiness was paramount. But I knew deep down what this opportunity meant to him. To deny it would be to clip his wings, and I loved him too much to ever do that. Yet, the thought of leaving everything behind, my job, my friends, the comfort of the familiar, filled me with an unsettling mix of excitement and apprehension. He found me there a few minutes later, still in just his boxer briefs, his hair delightfully rumpled. He always looked so much younger when he first woke up, a gentle vulnerability softening his usually focused features. He padded over, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and rested his chin on my shoulder, letting out a contented sigh. "Morning, love," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. He pressed a soft kiss to my temple. "Thinking hard, I see." I leaned back into him, soaking in his warmth. Just watching the city wake up, and, everything else. He squeezed me gently. About Santa Fe? I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. It's a big move, isn't it? It is, he agreed, his tone even. The biggest we'd make, but we don't have to decide anything right now. We still have time. He was right, technically. The museum had given him a month, but the clock was ticking louder in my head each day. I know, I said, turning in his arms to face him. His eyes, the color of warm molasses, held mine. They always had a way of seeing right through me, peeling back layers I didn't even realize I had. It's a whole new life, a blank slate. He traced the line of my jaw with his thumb. And that scares you? A little, I admitted honestly. Mostly, it's the unknown, and leaving behind what we've built here. I gestured vaguely around our apartment, which was filled with memories, with pieces of art we'd collected together, with the echoes of laughter and quiet conversations. He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. What we've built isn't tied to these walls, It's in us. It's in every moment we share, every secret, every dream. That travels with us, no matter where we go. His words were a balm, soothing some of the anxiety coiling in my stomach. He had a way of doing that, of simplifying the complex, of grounding me when I felt adrift. It was one of the many reasons I loved him. You always know what to say, I whispered, leaning in to kiss him. His lips were soft, familiar, tasting of coffee and sleep and pure affection. The kiss deepened, a slow ender exploration that spoke volumes without a single word. It was moments like these, stolen from the everyday, that reaffirmed everything. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against mine. So, what's it going to be, my love? He asked, his voice soft, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Hope, anticipation, maybe a hint of fear of his own. Are you ready to explore the desert with me? I looked into his eyes, truly seeing the earnestness there, the unwavering belief in us. My mind flashed back to a conversation we'd had years ago, just a few months after we started dating. We were walking through a park, hand in hand, talking about our dreams. I'd mentioned a fleeting fantasy of living somewhere completely different, somewhere with wide open spaces and stunning natural beauty, a stark contrast to the urban landscape we were accustomed to. Santiago had listened intently, his gaze fixed on the horizon, and said, "Wherever you go, I'll follow." At the time, it felt like a romantic hyperbole, but now his offer was real, and it was my turn to embody that promise. I began, my voice a little shaky with emotion. I think I'd like that very much. A slow, radiant smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. He let out a triumphant whoop, scooping me up in his arms and spinning me around until I laughed, breathless and giddy. "You won't regret it, I promise," he declared, setting me down but keeping me close. "We'll make it an adventure. Our adventure." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Packing up our life was both cathartic and bittersweet. Each box held not just objects, but memories. I found old concert tickets tucked into a book, a collection of silly photos from our first vacation together, a handwritten note from Santiago after a particularly tough day at work. Every item sparked a recollection, a story, a feeling. Santiago was incredibly organized, labeling each box with military precision, while I tended to get lost in the nostalgia, often pausing to reminisce. "Look at this," I'd say, holding up a faded t-shirt from a marathon he'd run years ago, sweat-stained and well-loved. "Remember how proud you were? I thought you were going to float away with pure joy." He'd grin, taking the shirt from me. I was. And you were there, cheering me on at every mile marker, even though it was pouring rain. You were soaked to the bone. He'd press a kiss to my forehead. "You always show up for me." It was true. We had always shown up for each other, through thick and thin. This move was just another testament to that commitment. The biggest hurdle, surprisingly, wasn't my own apprehension, but my family. My mother, bless her heart, was worried. Santa Fe? That's so far. Are you sure about this, honey? What about your job here? What about us? Her voice, usually so cheerful, was laced with concern. I spent hours on the phone, reassuring her, explaining that my work as a freelance graphic designer meant I could work from anywhere with an internet connection. I told her about the beautiful art scene in Santa Fe, how vibrant and unique it was, and how excited Santiago was. But mostly, I told her about Santiago, about our love, about our shared vision for a future that extended beyond the familiar. Mom, I'd finally said, my voice soft but firm, he's my family now too. And where he goes, I want to go. This isn't a sacrifice, it's a choice. A choice for our future, together. There was a long silence on the other end, then a sigh. Okay, honey, if you're happy, truly happy, then that's all that matters to me. Just promise you'll visit often. And video calls. Lots of video calls. Her eventual acceptance, though tinged with sadness, lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Santiago was equally relieved. His own family, being spread across different states, was more accustomed to geographical distance, but they were thrilled for his new opportunity and welcoming of me into their fold. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of packing, we collapsed onto the sofa, surrounded by a maze of boxes. The apartment felt strangely hollow, half emptied of its soul. Santiago stretched, groaning softly, and then pulled me close, resting his head on my chest. "It feels surreal, doesn't it?" he mumbled, his voice muffled against my shirt. "Like we're on the cusp of something entirely new." "It does," I agreed, stroking his hair. "A little terrifying, a little exhilarating." He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "I couldn't do this without you, you know." "Of course you could," I countered gently. "You're incredibly capable." "Maybe, but I wouldn't want to," he clarified, his grip on my waist tightening. "It wouldn't be the same. The adventure wouldn't be nearly as bright, as meaningful, if you weren't by my side." His honesty always disarmed me. It wasn't a weakness. It was a profound strength, an acknowledgement of interdependence that made our connection so rich. He didn't need me in a codependent way. He desired me, respected me, loved me as an equal partner, and valued my presence above all else. "And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but by your side," I confessed, pressing a kiss to the crown of his head, "even if that side happens to be in the middle of a desert in New Mexico." He chuckled, a warm rumble against my chest. "It's not just desert, you know. It's mountains and mesas and incredible sunsets and a vibrant art community that I think you'll absolutely love." "I'm sure I will," I said, picturing the landscape he described, a stark contrast to the concrete jungle we were leaving behind. A sense of anticipation, genuine excitement, began to bloom in my chest, pushing aside the last vestiges of fear. This wasn't just his dream. It was becoming our dream. The day of the move arrived, a blur of movers, last-minute checks, and emotional goodbyes to friends who promised to visit. As we locked the door to our old apartment for the final time, a strange mix of sadness and liberation washed over me. It was the end of an era, certainly, but also the exhilarating beginning of another. The drive across the country was an adventure in itself. We took our time, stopping at quirky roadside attractions, marveling at the changing landscapes, and listening to endless playlists that spanned every genre imaginable. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, our hopes for the new house, our visions for our careers, our past mistakes, our future dreams. We laughed until our sides hurt and fell into comfortable silences, hands intertwined, just enjoying each other's presence. One evening, we pulled off the highway in a small town in Oklahoma, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. We found a quaint motel, nothing fancy, but clean and welcoming. After a simple dinner, we sat on the small patio outside our room, the air thick with the scent of distant rain and dry earth. Santiago leaned back in his chair, a contented sigh escaping his lips. "This," he said, gesturing to the vast, darkening sky. This is what I mean. Open space, a chance to breathe. I reached for his hand, tracing the lines on his palm with my thumb. It's beautiful, different, but beautiful. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the last light of the sunset. Are you truly okay with all this? With leaving everything behind? There was a flicker of genuine concern in his gaze, a quiet reconfirmation that my feelings still mattered deeply to him. I squeezed his hand. Yes, Santiago, I am. Because it's not leaving everything behind. It's bringing everything important with us. And that's you. And us. He smiled, a soft, intimate smile that made my heart ache in the best possible way. He leaned over and kissed me, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of gratitude and profound love. Thank you, he whispered against my lips, for trusting me, for trusting us. Always, I murmured back, pulling him closer until he was sitting on my lap, our legs entwined. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling his familiar scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my chest. You know, he whispered, his voice soft, almost a secret. I still remember that night, early on, when you fell asleep on my couch. I watched you for ages, just watched you breathing. And I thought to myself, he has such beautiful lips. And then I wondered what it would be like to just trace them with my finger, to feel them, to kiss them without waking you. He chuckled softly. I was so utterly gone for you, even then. My heart swelled, a warm, overwhelming feeling. It wasn't the first time he'd alluded to that moment, that specific observation, but each time it felt new, intimate, a private reaffirmation of his affection. It wasn't about vanity. It was about being seen, desired, cherished, in the simplest, most human way. And you woke me up with that whisper, I reminded him, my voice thick with emotion. And my whole world shifted. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his gaze intense. And my world gained its center. He leaned down again, this time to kiss my lips slowly, deeply, as if savoring every moment. It was a kiss that promised forever, a silent vow exchanged under the vast, star-dusted Oklahoma sky. We arrived in Santa Fe 2 days later, greeted by the clear, dry air and the stunning adobe architecture that glowed in the afternoon sun. Our new house, a charming casita nestled on a quiet street, felt immediately welcoming. It had a small, walled courtyard, perfect for morning coffee and evening stargazing. The first thing we did, even before unloading the boxes, was walk through every room, holding hands, imagining our life unfolding within its walls. The days that followed were a flurry of unpacking, decorating, and exploring our new surroundings. Santiago dove headfirst into his work at the museum, his passion for art radiating from him. I found myself equally captivated by the city's unique charm, the vibrant art scene, the scent of piñon wood smoke in the evenings. I set up my design studio in a sun-filled room overlooking the courtyard, feeling a renewed sense of creative energy. One Saturday morning, several weeks after our arrival, we decided to hike one of the nearby trails. The air was crisp, the sky an impossibly brilliant blue, and the views of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains were breathtaking. As we walked, hand in hand, surrounded by the quiet majesty of nature, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. It's even better than I imagined, I confessed to Santiago, squeezing his hand. The quiet, the light, the sheer beauty of it all. He smiled, a genuine, wide smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I knew you'd love it. It's got a different kind of magic, doesn't it? It does, I agreed. It feels like possibility. We reached a small clearing at the top of a rise, with panoramic views stretching for miles. We paused, just standing there, arms around each other, taking it all in. The world felt vast and infinite. And yet, in Santiago's embrace, I felt perfectly grounded. You know, he said, breaking the silence, his voice soft, I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. about everything. I looked up at him, a flicker of anticipation, a nervous flutter stirring in my stomach. His gaze was serious, yet tender. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath hitched, my heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't unexpected, not entirely. We'd talked about it, hinted at it, dreamed of it, but seeing the box, feeling the weight of the moment, was entirely different. He got down on one knee, right there on the dusty trail, his eyes never leaving mine. "My love," he began, his voice surprisingly steady, though I could see the slight tremor in his hand as he opened the box. Inside, a simple, elegant silver band, intricately carved, caught the sunlight. "From the moment I saw you, really saw you, I knew my life was going to change. And every day since, you've exceeded every hope, every dream I never even knew I had." A tear escaped my eye, tracing a path down my cheek. I hadn't realized I was crying until I felt the wetness. "You challenge me. You inspire me. You make me laugh harder than anyone else," he continued, his voice deepening with emotion. "You see past all my flaws and love me anyway. You've shown me what true partnership means, what unwavering support feels like. You are my home, my anchor, and my greatest adventure." He paused, taking a deep breath, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "So, will you do me the honor, my dearest, and marry me? Will you make this unfolding horizon ours, forever?" My voice was a choked whisper, but the word came out clear. "Yes! Oh my God, yes!" He surged to his feet, pulling me into a fierce embrace, spinning me around again, just like that morning in the kitchen. I laughed, tears streaming down my face, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a suddenly spinning world. He kissed me then, a desperate, joyful kiss that tasted of salt and hope and a boundless future. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, a symbol of everything we were, everything we had been, and everything we were yet to become. "I love you, Santiago," I whispered, burying my face in his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "And I, you, my beautiful love," he murmured back, holding me tighter, more than words can say. Later that evening, back at the casita, we sat in the courtyard under a sky ablaze with stars, a perfect, inky canvas for our new beginning. A bottle of celebratory wine sat between us, and the glow of a small fire pit warmed the cool desert air. The crickets chirped a rhythmic lullaby, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of a nearby cottonwood tree. I held up my hand, admiring the ring glinting on my finger. It felt like a tangible piece of the magic we shared. "Still can't believe this is real," I said, my voice filled with wonder. Santiago reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. "It's real. All of it. The move, the museum, the proposal. Us." We talked for hours, dreaming aloud about our wedding, intimate, meaningful, surrounded by the people who loved us. We talked about adopting a dog, about future travels, about how we'd grow old together, still holding hands, still sharing secrets. As the night deepened and the fire dwindled to embers, Santiago leaned over and kissed my forehead, then my cheek, then gently, tenderly, my lips. "You know," he whispered, his voice low and soft, reminiscent of that first magical night, "you still have the most beautiful lips I've ever seen." I smiled against his, "And you, my love, have the most beautiful heart." In that moment, under the vast, silent expanse of the New Mexico sky, with the quiet hum of the desert surrounding us, I knew, with an absolute certainty, that we had truly found our home, not just in a new city or in a charming casita, but in each other. The horizon before us was indeed unfolding, on and bright and full of infinite possibilities, and I couldn't imagine facing it with anyone else but Santiago, my anchor, my compass, my beautiful, unwavering love.